Chair Pranger, we're ready when you are.
We're supposed to behave, Mr. Chair. I would like to start this meeting by recognizing that the area we call the Fraser Valley Regional Hospital District, where we are gathered today, is the homeland of 30 different First Nations communities. Actions and decisions made by government in the past have left many Indigenous communities untrusting the Canadian healthcare system. It is our collective responsibility to keep this at the forefront of our minds as we make decisions, since the decisions we make have a direct impact on the physical and mental well-being of all community members, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So with that in mind, I would like to call to order the December 14th, 2023 meeting of the Hospital District Board to order. Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you. Looking for approval of the agenda, and late items.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Director Facio, Director Clute. Those in favor, contrary, carried.
Item 4.1 is the draft Fraser Valley Regional Hospital District Board meeting minutes of November 23rd, 2023.
Someone move. Director Mercer and Director McElhonick. Those in favor, contrary, carried.
Item 5.1 is the 2024 Hospital District Provisional Budget. There are two options for your consideration.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Director Horn.
I'd like to move option 1, please.
Moved, seconded, Director Clute. Discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, I think that option 1 gets us going on the items we've already identified and allows us to continue the conversation we've had, or are hoping to have more in the new year with Fraser Health. And until that time, until we have some of the outcomes I think we're all collectively looking for, we should be in the zone where we have been, and we can work in good faith to get to a new number and a new process.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? Those in favor, contrary, that carries.
So we have motion number 2 and then motion number 3, Madam Chair.
Okay, motion number 1, Director Dixon and Director Clute. Those, any discussion? Those in favor, contrary, carried. Motion number 3. Moved, Director Popoff and Director Lum.
Madam Chair, are we on 2 or 3?
Number 3. Yep. Yep.
Those in favor, contrary, carried.
Thank you very much. So moving down to reports from board directors.
Any reports from board members? Seeing none.
And next is public question period for items relevant to the agenda. We do not have any members of the public joining us in the boardroom this evening, but we'll just turn to our corporate officer, Jamie Van Ness.
Thank you. We do not have any members of the public joining us online, and we have not received any written questions with respect to this agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Van Ness.
So looking for a resolution to close the meeting.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Director Facio and Director Gibson. Those in favor, contrary, carried. Thank you.
Okay, so we will recess and then move over to the Regional District Board.
All right. Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to start the meeting by recognizing the homeland of the 30 First Nation communities of this area we call the FERD, where we live, work, and learn. The important decisions that we make here at the local government level can affect First Nation communities and Indigenous peoples in a great many ways, both today and in the future. So as part of our collective responsibility, I commit that we continually examine the work we do to ensure that our projects, our plans, our initiatives and discussions are guided by the principles of inclusion, collaboration, and reconciliation. And with that in mind, I'd like to call the December 14th, 2023 meeting of the Fraser Valley Regional District Board to order. First item is Kinnaman.
I think
Yes,
you had
I
a
do,
special
yeah.
presentation.
I do. I just realized the first item is me. And so um, we have a director who's been with us since 2018, was appointed in 2018, and who I've had the pleasure of working with for a lot of years, almost 20 years, both as a staff person who reported to him and then as a colleague on council. And it's his last meeting this evening. And I was going to make a bit of a bigger deal about him, but I also make it a point of not teasing him because I've learned that it's a career limiting decision. So, even though he's a retired Mountie, still just as a rule, I don't lay it on too thick. But I do want to recognize Director Mercer, and I do want to say on behalf of the board, I certainly have enjoyed working alongside him. We benefit from his long tenured experience, both his professional career and here on the board as director. Of course, he's been our chair of our HR committee since its inception, and they've done some really good work for the board. So I did want to, on behalf of the board, wish you well, recognize you for your service, and thank you. In all honesty, you know, you're a pretty frank, straightforward guy. I appreciate always knowing where I stand with you, and that's a real benefit. And so I appreciate you being here, and I wish you very well. And if anybody else has anything nice to say, they can go ahead until he's got a smirk on his face. So I know he's going to say something not so nice to me. But anybody? I'm going to turn it over to you, Director Mercer, and then I've got something for you.
Yeah, for those that don't know, and I can't not take the opportunity when I have the mic to tell you the little story.
I knew it was coming.
Jason used to work for me when he was an IT brat, working for the city when I was responsible for the Lower Mainland, I think at the time, or something like that. And I can remember asking my receptionist, or my EA, whatever it was called in that day, and is why this long-haired kid with his hat on backwards was in my office, and it was Jason, right? And he would walk around, his hair had everything but a ponytail with board shorts, and hat on backwards, walking through the police station. And that wasn't a good look back in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? But yeah, no, Jason and I go very up. No, thank you very much. It's been a great 5 years. Time to go. You'll enjoy working with Nicole Reed. She's the full meal deal. And it's time for me to move on. And besides, I have to admit, it's a little bit boring now without Adamson here. So
I knew he was gonna go for the code of conduct complaint already. So
thank you very much.
appreciate it. Bud, if you want to come up, yeah. We do have something for you, and get a quick photo. For those that can't see this, is Area B. This is a picture of Area B here. And And we do have a little a cake in the back. So if you haven't had a piece of cake, you're welcome to help yourself to that. Okay, Ms. Kenneman, next item.
Looking for approval of the agenda, addenda, and late items.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Facio, second by Director Shahal. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, opposed if any, the item carries. Next item.
4.1 is the 2023 point-in-time homeless count and survey final report. We do have a delegation by Ron Van Wyck of Enron Consulting.
Thank you. And Mr. Van Wyck is online, is he? Dr. Van Wyck, welcome.
Yes, thank you.
And the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, I just want to share the screen here. Good evening. I just want to check, can you hear me okay? And do you see my screen?
Yes, we can. We don't see your screen, but we do hear you. Okay, so we don't
I
presentation.
have done share screen, so
I'm wondering if we're we'll just get our staff to have a look at it. There we are. Okay, there we go. We see it now.
all right. So thank you for the opportunity to report on this. So before I dive into the presentation and the various slides, I just want to make a few comments at the beginning here. First is to acknowledge the participation of the persons who are experiencing homelessness for their participation in this project, for answering our questions and sharing deep personal information. Without that, we cannot report in terms of what the conditions and the situation is regarding homelessness in our region. Secondly, I also want to acknowledge and thank the staff from Community-Based Service Agency who conducted the interviews. And also number three, want to indicate that since 2004, the point-in-time count and surveys have always been done in collaboration with community service agencies, municipalities, Metro Vancouver, and the province, specifically BC Housing. And my fourth point is that the findings of these point-in-time counts and surveys continue to contribute to local and provincial understanding of homelessness and inform action to alleviate homelessness. Then moving to the first slide, this indicates to us the upward trend in the number of people who are experiencing homelessness. You can see that from 2004 to 2014, the number was around the 450 mark. And then since 2017, it has increased significantly. So to the extent that we now in 2023, for the first time, we have exceeded 1,000 people experiencing homelessness in the FVRD. This slide just shows the increase per community. Those are the 4 communities that have participated over the years and continue to do so. So you see the increase in the case of Abbotsford and Chilliwack and the Eastern Fraser Valley. In the case of Mission,
Dr. Van Wyck, I'm just going to interrupt you because I'm not sure if you're controlling the presentation or we got our staff on our side controlling the presentation, but I think we're one slide behind. There we go.
So I was told I should control the presentation. So I'm now at the slide showing the increases in Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Mission, and Eastern Fraser Valley.
Yeah.
Should I continue to control the slides?
I believe so. Do you want to try and make sure that you do have control of them so I don't have to interrupt you again?
So I've moved on to causes. Do you see that now?
Yeah, so I think your controls aren't working. So why don't you just indicate when you'd like the next slide and our staff will advance the slide for you.
All right, so we need to go to the next slide that says causes of homelessness.
Yep.
So this one shows to us the fact that, again, reiterate what we have said over the years since 2004, that the causes of homelessness coalesce or rotate around unaffordability, inadequate supply of affordable and suitable, including supportive housing, the role that substance use issues and mental health issues and a combination of the two play into it. Other health issues contribute as well, and then also family and the relational breakdowns. So, I mean, it's always a combination of this that play into the person eventually becoming homeless or experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. Duration of homelessness. So this is a slide. The information, the data here is of concern that it remains that the proportion of people who are experiencing homelessness for a long period of time, like 1 year and longer, is significant, 73%. The definition of chronic homelessness refers to people living homeless for 6 months or longer. So if you add 6 months or longer to the 73, then we are at 80% plus. So it is concerning that people remain homeless for a long period of time. Next slide, please. So then this slide tells us that, which is some good news in the sense that a proportion of people who have been sheltered on the night of the count has increased since 2017, from 37 to now just to about 52% now. So slightly more people are now being sheltered than remaining outside. So next slide, please. So see the slide in relation to the previous slide, where this one tells us the increase in the number of shelter beds since 2017 from 396 in the region to 602 in 2023. And then you see the number of increase in the number of people experiencing homelessness. And unfortunately, the gap is widening as we go from 2017 to 2023. So it tells us that the number of people who are experiencing homelessness outpace the increase in the number of people experiencing homelessness, outpace the increase in the number of shelter beds in our region. Moving to the next slide before the chair cut me off. Health issues remain prevalent and a major factor within or among people who are experiencing homelessness, and specifically substance use issues and mental health continue to be a major issue at play in terms of people experiencing homelessness. Note also that of the 58% of respondents who identified as currently having an addiction, 12% have indicated they do receive treatment at the time of the survey, and 28% indicated that they are seeking treatment. So clearly, that is something to be taken note of. Next slide. Just again breaks down in a bit more detail the health issues that are prevalent and have been reported by people who are experiencing homelessness. And you can see that all of them have increased. The proportion of people reporting health issues have increased from 2020 to 2023. Next slide. In terms of demographics, so those within the ages 30 to 49 makes up the biggest proportion, namely 48% of the people who are experiencing homelessness, and they are overrepresented if you look at their proportion within the general population. Persons 16 and older continues to increase, and those 19 and younger continues to decrease based on a point-in-time counseling survey. However, take a note of what is in the text box there, where reference is made to the fact that women and youth are typically experiencing what is called hidden forms of homelessness, and thus typically underrepresented in point-and-count surveys and enumeration. Next slide. In terms of this slide, what I want to highlight is the fact that, again, similar to what we found in the past, is that indigenous persons, unfortunately, are overrepresented amongst homeless people compared to their proportion within the general population. A significant, almost a third of people interviewed have indicated they have been in government care as a child or a youth. That's foster care, independent living agreements, youth agreements, youth group homes, etc. And then those that identify as LGBTQ+ are also overrepresented compared to their numbers in the general population. Next slide. Are we tracking okay, Chair, in terms of the slides?
Yes, we are. Yep.
Okay. This slide speaks to the length of time that respondents have indicated that they are within communities inside the FBRD. So it is important to note that about 60% of almost 60%, 58% of those that have said that they are that they are homeless are living within FBRD communities for 6 years or longer. So and if you add then those that say they have been here for 2 to 5 years, then the number goes up to about 78%. So a significant proportion, almost a quarter, almost 3/4 of people are here longer term. They have been here for a while, and that's important to take note of as well. Then key findings. Just want to draw your attention, Chair, and the rest of the board, to the fact that there is now a decade-long upward trend in persons experiencing homelessness in the FBRD. That health and complex health challenges remain prevalent, and the housing issue of housing costs, that I don't have to say too much about because I think they're all familiar with it. The slow supply of affordable and supportive housing remains a matter of concern. So that is what I just want to highlight in terms of the key findings. Then moving on to the next slide, which is the conclusions. And here I just want to draw your attention to the point about system level changes are needed. So I think a case can be made for a reevaluation of care and service models at work as it refers to healthcare provisioning, as well as housing and supportive housing provision, and how those two could, and how the service, the care and service models relating to those two provisionings of housing and healthcare can perhaps be better dovetailed, and what innovations may be had by relooking and reconsidering those, involving healthcare professionals and others in the process as well. Then the second one there, health needs are housing needs, meaning that the issue of homelessness that we see and report about in the FBRD and in BC and across the country is both a health issue and a housing issue. And then just to once again draw the attention and emphasize the need for continued collaboration between levels of government to see how we can speed up the provisioning of affordable housing. And we know that of late there are noises from the federal government, there's noises from the province, and so hopefully something we can attain greater speed in responding to the provisioning of much needed supportive housing and supportive care to people that present with complex health issues in terms of them being homeless. And then I want to just also indicate the need for a paradigm shift that I would argue for, and others would argue for too, meaning that I think there's a case to be made for moving more towards supportive housing provisioning rather than emergency sheltering provisioning. So emergency shelter is an important point of contact in the process, but I think we need to emphasize more housing, because emergency shelter is not housing. And so therefore, and then maybe lastly, the issue of research around rural and remote homelessness. We know that there's indication, that there are indications of increases in amongst those that may live homeless or experiencing homelessness in more rural and remote areas. And we need to look at the more tailored approach to that to get a better handle on those numbers and what is at play there, perhaps. I thank you. And if there are questions, I will try and answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Van Wyk. Any questions? Director Siemens.
Thank you. I appreciate all this work and the challenges that are before us. One of the biggest challenges that we're finding in some of our more challenging homeless camps, when people are surveyed, if they would go into shelter or housing, it's indicated, not all, but a number of the really challenging cases, they have indicated they don't want to live indoors. They don't want to live in shelter. We try our level best to build relationships. But we have a very, very wide or high standard that would force somebody in to care. And I know I don't want to tread on people's rights and freedoms. The challenge that we have is that they're not in the right frame of mind oftentimes, and they've had maybe bad experiences with shelters. Do you have any suggestions on some of that? The hardest to house, and how do we start to address that? Because building relationships, that what we're seeing is that when they're in an extreme crisis, and by then they have done some fairly significant physical damage as well, and so that makes it even much more challenging for them to be housed. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or perspectives on trying to address that hardest to house component of our most challenging encampments.
Director Simmons, first of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that you put your finger on an issue that we need to recognize. People's choice and the fact that people have rights and freedoms, and how do we balance that with the need to provide housing and to take care of the fallout, the impact of this on community and community living and community safety and well-being. So I think I just want to put that out there in the beginning. I don't have an answer for you in terms of what the solution is, other than to say that we know that there's evidence from the Housing First approaches and Housing First projects in terms of relationship building, in terms of supportive housing first, providing housing, providing supports that may break down the resistance over time. But it is a reality that there are those who by first look would appear to and would state that they are not interested in moving inside. So I don't have an answer for you other to say that I think that's an item and an aspect that I think need to be looked at by the health professionals, by service agencies, by psychologists, therapists, to see how to be able to bring someone's mind around in terms of understanding the importance of being housed and living inside, and get on a better health trajectory for him or herself. So I'm sorry that I can't give you a more specific solution to that challenge, but I think we need to go back to the professionals and see what is happening in other jurisdictions. And there is evidence from, as I say, from Housing First projects, and that might be helpful for us to look at. But that it is a tough one to deal with, I think I acknowledge that.
Thank you, Director Shahal.
Thank you, Chair Lum. And thank you for your report. I think every time I see it, I gain some insight. I'm interested in the area of health issues, especially when it's described as mental health issue, physical disability, medical condition, acquired brain injury, and learning disability. Like, these are big numbers. So when I'm wondering what medical condition is that Hep C, or is it I don't know what it is. Is it something? Are these conditions further challenges for individuals? But also, often hear about people attending a hospital and seeing so many people that are unhoused around the hospital. Well, it makes sense because there's so many health issues, it seems like. But I'm wondering also about the acquired brain injury. Is this like organic brain injury, or is it drug-induced psychosis? I'm kind of curious about those categories. Thank you.
I'm not a medical professional, so I won't be able to speak in terms of medical terms. First of all, we need to recognize that what is reported on here is what people self-report. So it is not based on a diagnosis from a health professional. It's self-reporting. The acquired brain injury refers to, a brain injury that was obtained either through an accident, or maybe a difficult birth, or those types of situations. So it doesn't speak to drug-induced psychosis specifically. No, it's not. It's more injury, because there's a number of people that have reported that, that have been injured on the job, for instance, or have been injured through violence, a violent fight or interactions. Brain injuries as a result of spousal abuse. And those would be examples of what is at play in terms of the acquired brain injury.
Director Barkman.
Couple of questions. 75% of that homeless numbers between Abbotsford and Chilliwack, is that because we have the wraparound services that would draw the people to those two locations, or what's the reason for such a high number?
I have no idea. We didn't ask that question. That was not part of the survey to find out why people are where they are. So I can't answer that question.
Okay, and just one other thing, on the last slide, you had something about remote and rural. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, there are people who experience homelessness that, for instance, camp out or put up camp or temporary shelter at the rest stop between Chilliwack and Abbotsford, or the rest stop between Abbotsford and Langley, or the rest stop around, between Chilliwack and Hope. Those or there are people living along the Chilliwack River area, and those could be areas, or in Hope too, outside of the municipal boundary of Hope, outside the municipal boundary of Chilliwack. But they are serviced. They do receive services from the service providers in Chilliwack. So they are on land, or they are on Island 22. That's land that's not controlled under the jurisdiction of the municipality, but under the province or the Ministry of Highways. And so we are trying to get a sense as to how many people find themselves and put up camp and shelters in those types of areas. Up the canyon, towards Boston Bar, in the area around the Othello tunnels in Hope, the Skagit area, or towards Silver Lake area, Hope, outside the Hope municipal bound. That's what we are talking about here in terms of rural and remote homelessness. The area, outside from Mission towards Agassiz, outside the municipal boundary of Mission. Those are the areas we are talking about.
Thank you. Director Horn.
Thank you. Before I get to my questions, Mr. Dr. Van Wyk, Director Shahal, if you see me later on, I'll show you a study that gets to your question. I happen to have done a little bit of work on that. It's in the Lancet, and it says about 50% of people may actually have acquired brain injuries that they're experiencing homelessness. Two questions for you, Mr. Van Wyk. First of all, thank you for a great job, and I know you were part of a team, but thank you to the team. Table 1 in the document is kind of confusing to me, and I really appreciated that in your slideshow, you actually have the graphs going back to 2017 in each community. Even having done a research background, I have to tell you, I find table 1 difficult, but this slide that's right here, this is the one, you can't see it, but it goes back to 2014. I'm wondering if we can simply have that shared with each community. I think you're coming out to each community if memory serves. Is that correct?
Well, if I'm invited to the communities, I will go.
You're invited.
But which slide are you referencing?
This is the slide that says PIT count totals by sub-community, 2014,
Okay,
23.
Yeah,
So
okay.
even if you
yeah.
email that to us, Doctor, that would be very helpful because, as I say, I know that there's been lots of questions and it's difficult for the average person, including me, to parse that one table. My other
Okay.
issue or other question, not issue, has to do with the new question that was added at the very end, that asked whether people had been directed from one community to another by, and then it was rather general, a counselor, an officer, or some official. And I just really am interested in diving into that because as elected people, we often hear this narrative that folks are being directed away from a community. I'm not quite sure if that question reflects that people were directed away from a community or whether or not there's any evidence that people were directed to a community because there was a better service there or an empty bed there. Do you have any sense of that?
The question was included on the request of the team from Chilliwack. And there was also support for it from Abbotsford because of the notion that we hear from time to time that people are being sent here, or they put on a taxi and sent to Chilliwack or Abbotsford. And so, 10%, almost just under 10% of people have said that they indeed have been directed to come here. And so examples of that include, a worker, and I'm sort of making this, not making it up, but I'm not, let's say, for example, as an example, a worker in Maple Ridge, encounter someone that is homeless, needs a shelter, but the Maple Ridge shelter is full. But the worker happens to know that the Mission shelter has space or the Chilliwack shelter has space, and then takes steps to get that person to Chilliwack or to Mission. So that is recorded then as having been directed to come here. We have other examples where someone was said that he was picked up by the police and dropped off in Community X. He or she was released from jail and told to go to Community X because there is a shelter. So those are the examples that we have captured in that question. 10%, is 10%. It's about 100 people of the overall total of 1,000 that have that stated that they have been sent to a community in the FVRD. So that's the best I can respond to that question.
Okay, thank you. My quick comment to wrap up is that I'm hoping that the next time we do this, we can ask that follow-up question because it really helps us to understand whether what we need is more coordination at a regional level or whether it's because we have an issue where folks are doing something they shouldn't do. That's what remains unclear here. So I appreciate this and consider this an invitation to come out to Mission and present with Kirsten. Thank you very much.
If Kirsten can send me an email, I will certainly respond. Thank you.
All right. So in the interest of time, I've got a little speakers list. I've got Director Michael Honick, Director Dickey, and Director Davidson, and then I'm going to move us along. So go ahead, Director Michael Honick.
Thank you, Ron. Patty McElhonick here, Director McElhonick. I was on the first one in 2004, part of the homeless count. But so just from the numbers, I've been doing this work for a long time in different areas, and from the numbers, if you look for the board, if it said that most of the people have been here in their communities for quite some time. So I think it's not very many people are directed here from my experience, but it does happen. I know that I've worked with our mayor and different groups where we've had with my organization where people have been dropped off by taxi at a house and not been able to, we've had to send them back because they're just not able to, they're not fit to be in the house. Something that some of you might not know that I did some consulting with and went in as a part-time executive director with BC Brain Injury, but I was on the board of the Fraser Valley Brain Injury Association, the BC Brain Injury Association, and then also the Brain Injury Association of Canada. So I'm pretty familiar with that. There's a lot of people in the community. Brain injury can happen through many different sources, and a lot of people fall through the cracks. And it can be, people can look like they're, it's an invisible, a lot of times, disability. And they might seem okay, they might talk okay and that, but they're not able to maintain jobs sometimes. They're not able to maintain housing because they have some deficits in different areas, and they really fall through the cracks. And they really end up, there is a large proportion of people that have brain injury that are overrepresented in homeless, and I'm happy to talk about that ever, but and then the rural homeless, I think, is where I'm really looking at right now is my director role, because, you know, we've got the one area closing down, and we're just concerned we're going to be moving them out into Chilliwack River Valley Area E. There's just nowhere for people to go, and shelters aren't safe. A lot of the other shelters for people. So, you know, it's a complex situation, and I mean, we have women that come into our low barrier house, and they're not able to stay because they are not able to self-regulate into shared living. And for something like that, we would need smaller group homes with like more staffing. Like, there's so many different kinds of housing that is needed for different kinds of situations and people that are experiencing homelessness for many different reasons. And like Ron was saying, like, you have, you know, it'll be concurrent. So they'll have like health issues and mental health issues. They'll have addictions and whatever. And then throughout a lot of it is brain injury. So these are not easy answers, but it's just so heartening to see that the work is still going on, but also very disheartening to see how many people are impacted. And I know very clearly how the hidden homeless, how many women and children. If women end up homeless and it's found out, they lose their children. So they absolutely hide. So that's something that we deal with too. So I just want to really commend you for your work and thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's the team indeed. Yeah.
Director Dickey.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Van Wyck. And certainly, I think we're all concerned by this issue and commiserate with people that find themselves in this situation. I always look at these numbers and get a slightly different context. So, as I understand it, if you look at the city of Chilliwack, there are 4 people per 1,000 in the community that are homeless, and I think in Abbotsford there are less than 3 people that are homeless per 1,000 people in the community. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that number always strikes me to kind of get an idea of just the context of the situation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I'm just picking up on the tailored research and rural and remote necessity comment, and noting that the next survey presumably is another 3 years out from today. Can we expect that to be addressed? I'm not sure if this is a staff question or a question for you, Dr. Van Wyck, but as a rural and remote rep, I honestly don't know what kind of problem I might have. I just can't see because it's too far off the road. So I'm just hoping that the next time around that we're able to be able to speak with that tailored research, but I don't know what needs to happen for that to happen. Any comments from the staff?
I will defer to the staff on that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kinnaman.
I think we will look to Allison Stewart, our manager of regional strategic planning, who helps us lead this count in terms of the process for including more around the rural and remote communities in terms of homelessness.
Through the chair, excuse my voice. The challenge with rural homelessness and just the nature of the point in time counts is that it is voluntary. So it's not a question of going to a location and counting people. It is very much people have to be willing to participate to be counted outside of shelters. in terms of getting a better handle of rural homelessness, I certainly think there's a role for the provincial governments. It's a lot of folks are living on Crown land, and that's either in the electoral areas or also within the municipalities in park and rides and that sort of thing. So I think looking at more focused types of studies and working with professionals to develop studies to work with outreach workers and also people who are experiencing homelessness in the rural areas. I think creating a more robust sort of research area would be quite valuable. But the point in time count as it is, it gives you a sense of what's happening, but just the complexity and just the sheer size of this region makes it a challenge to really have a full understanding of the challenge.
So just following up, to me, for the provincial government to get involved seems improbable. But anyway, I'm hoping there's some discussion on what strategies could be considered at least, because it just sounds like we're not going to try, to be honest. And we got 3 years to sort of think about it, and I hope we do. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Director Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A friend of mine, Sam Sullivan, former mayor of Vancouver, he told me, he said the number one issue, he believes social issue in Vancouver is isolation. And I'm reminded of a stat I saw recently that in the States, at least, 20 years ago, the average male had 3.5 friends, whatever the stat was. Today, the average American male has less than 1 friend. Now, you might wonder why I'm mentioning that now, but if you look at the causes of homelessness, and this report is very well done. I think the detail is laudable. But the challenge is so many people are isolated. They don't have a support system around them. You'll notice all the causes here. And with social isolation comes an inability to solve problems. If you've got friends or people to connect with or family members, you can process issues such as mental illness, sometimes even addictions. But now, we're so fragmented and so isolated in our society, it's not surprising sometimes that homelessness is becoming epidemic in many areas, including our own, where it's growing. So I would be interested in maybe some comments on that. How do we diminish social isolation and get people to have a support group around them, friendships? Because with that, it's likely going to diminish some of the negative impacts of homelessness and allow people to maintain a healthy relationship in our society. So that's my question.
Okay, Mr. Van Wyck, realizing that it's getting a little bit later in the evening, not sure you're going to be able to provide a fulsome answer to that. I'm not sure it's your responsibility alone, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think again that is a factor that Council Director Gibson is putting his finger on. That is a major factor. Someone in Hope said to me that, someone that is working in the community as someone that provides services, that what people need is accompaniment, is friendship, which speaks to Director Gibson's point. So what comes to mind in terms of a way to deal with that would be the idea of circles of support and accountability, and support, which also I think speaks to the issue that Director Simmons mentioned earlier on. How do you handle, deal, and approach people that say no, they can't live inside? So the idea of a wraparound circle of support and accountability is something that comes to mind that could be entertained and looked at, and you can bring volunteers into that from a community level, and I think there are people at the community level that wants to be involved in something tangible, but it's a long road, and it's not an easy road necessarily. It's a road that will take twists and turns. It's a road that will take a few steps forward and a few steps back. But that's something that comes to mind in response to Director Gibson's commentary.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Van Wyk, for your presentation again this evening. There's a couple questions that I have that I'll probably just ask staff to look into them, and maybe they can correspond with you prior to the report getting circulated. But the two questions that I would have are number one, it's indicated that this is it's believed that this is an undercount. These point in time counts are actually an undercount of the true number of people experiencing homelessness in the region. I'm wondering if there's an idea of what that undercount is, a rough percentage. So are we talking, is it a 10% undercount? Are we 20, 30, 40? And the other question that I would have is, again, it's more to do with Director Horn's question about that 10% out of region and the number, which is I think 15% that have been in the communities less than a year. If they self-report what communities they're coming from. So are we seeing a trend of that 15%, that 164 people traveling? Are they coming from communities west of us? Is it a combination thereof? And I won't put you on the spot for those two questions, but just something that I'd like staff to maybe correspond with you, and if you could consider those. Then I'd look for a motion, mover and seconder. It's moved by Director Gibson, seconded by Director Pranger. I don't see, I'll call the question. All in favor, opposed if any, that carries. And Dr. Van Wyk, thank you again for your presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Ms. Kinnaman, next item.
5.1 is the draft Fraser Valley Regional District Board meeting minutes of November 23rd, 2023.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Ross, seconded by Director Clute. All in favor, opposed if any, item carries. Next item.
Items 6.1 through 6.3 are committee minutes for information and matters arising. Happy to separate any of those items.
Any questions on the information items? Next item.
7.1 is the FVRD Code of Responsible Conduct Policy Update, and we have a presentation by Jamie Van Ness, our Director of Legislative Services.
Ms. Van Ness, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Lum and board members. Tonight, I will be providing you with a presentation on the FVRD Code of Responsible Conduct Policy Update. So to give you a bit of a background on this topic, the 2018 Code of Responsible Conduct was adopted in September 2018 during the previous board term. This policy is a written document that sets out shared expectations for the board's conduct and behavior. The current code of conduct applies to all board members, alternate directors, and board appointees. So following the 2022 general local elections, the community charter was updated, and a requirement was made that within 6 months of a council or board's first meeting, there was a requirement for the board or council to review their existing code of conduct, or if they didn't have one in place, to consider putting one in place. Back in May of 2023, the board provided direction to staff to review the existing code of conduct and to bring forward some recommendations for an update, and to also bring forward recommendations for a formalized enforcement process. And then lastly, this topic went to the December 4th Human Resources Committee. And at that meeting, the committee made a recommendation, and that recommendation is on your agenda tonight. So in undertaking this review, staff reviewed a number of resources available through the Provincial Working Group on Responsible Conduct. This is a joint initiative between UBCM, the Local Government Management Association, and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So included in these resource documents was the Forging the Path to Responsible Conduct policy. And this provides advice on fostering responsible conduct, maintaining good governance, and resolving conduct issues informally, as well as the essentials of code of conduct enforcement. This working group also provided resources on a model code of conduct and recommended the District of Squamish as being a excellent example for local governments to follow. So as part of that review process, staff reviewed that code of conduct by the District of Squamish, as well as codes of conduct adopted by the FERD member municipalities. So when looking at our 6 member municipalities, the cities of Mission, Abbotsford, District of Kent, and Hope have a formalized process to address conduct issues as part of their code of conduct, whereas the Village of Harrison, Hot Springs, and City of Chilliwack do not. The 2018 Code of Conduct sets out established shared standards and expectations with respect to conduct and behavior. The 2018 Code of Conduct attaches a schedule with some examples of irresponsible conduct and requires that members acknowledge that they won't engage in these types of behavior. The 2018 Code of Conduct does not include any type of formalized process to address any type of less than responsible conduct should it occur. And as we've seen in the news recently, there's complex conduct issues emerging in many local governments across BC. And in some of those cases, municipal advisors have been sent out to provide coaching and guidance and advice to local government elected officials. In some of these cases, we're hearing words like censure and sanctions, but what does that actually mean? Censure simply means an expression of disapproval, and it shows the public, a board or council's disapproval of a censured elected official's conduct. And a censure is often combined with sanctions, which can include things like suspension or removal of appointments, limits on accessing certain local government facilities, or perhaps a recommendation that the elected official issue an apology for their conduct. The current practice at the FERD is for the CAO and the board chair to directly address and resolve any conduct complaints. Most of these have been of a relatively minor nature and have been handled between the parties. The draft formalized process in the draft policy incorporates this existing practice, encouraging a resolution process first and addressing and resolving conduct issues. First and foremost is the need to focus first on prevention. This means encouraging and providing good governance measures and training, such as orientation, skills building, and attendance at local government leadership academy seminars. However, there are some times when issues escalate and there are additional measures needed to address conduct issues. There are 2 options available. There's the informal process or the informal approach, which is currently the case for us right now, or a formalized enforcement process. There are many things to consider as part of the 2 options, and there's pros and cons on both sides. Informal processes involve a number of approaches, including individual or facilitated discussions. The working group resources provided by the province encourage the use of informal resolutions, as it's less costly and often will lead to better outcomes than formal investigations and sanctions. On the flip side, the resources also recommend, as a best practice, the inclusion of a formalized enforcement process to address alleged code of conduct contraventions and a range of sanctions that may be imposed. This is considered a best practice as it's standard and consistent, and it's written out ahead of time in advance of any type of conduct issues, and everybody understands what the process is. However, there could be significant impacts to finance and staff capacity with this formalized process, as it can be costly, it can be time consuming, and often will require people with specialized skills. We've been advised that the typical third-party investigation can sometimes take up to 2 months and may cost between $20,000 and $25,000. However, in the suggested formalized process in the draft policy, it relies first on a resolution process to resolve complaints before escalating to any type of investigation process. However, that wouldn't be the case in the case of a very serious or egregious complaint that came forward. So again, there's pros and cons to both sides, but it's important to keep in mind the potential financial and staff impacts that could be seen as a result of a formalized process. So a policy does not replace, but it supplements the existing policies and legislation. The community charter outlines conflict of interest requirements, restrictions on accepting gifts, mandatory leaves of absence for elected officials who have been charged with offenses under the criminal code, and disqualifications for office and confidentiality requirements. In addition, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act sets out requirements for the protection of personal information. We do have existing FERD policies that set out expected behavior, such as the FERD discrimination, bullying and harassment policy, as well as our anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy, as well as our privacy breach policy. I'll just note that the board will actually be receiving some training on the discrimination, bullying, and harassment policy next year. And you'll also be receiving some online privacy training in January this coming year. So after reviewing the existing 2018 Code of Conduct policy, reviewing the working group resources, considering best practices, looking at the codes of conduct that have been implemented by our member municipalities, staff have a few recommendations to our existing policy. Firstly, we're recommending some housekeeping updates. There's some spelling errors, some minor typographical errors that could be updated. We're recommending the inclusion of reference to existing FERD policies that weren't in place at the time of the adoption of the 2018 policy. We're recommending the removal of an out-of-date version of the oath of office that now exists in bylaw. We're recommending a reformatting the examples of irresponsible conduct in Schedule 1 just to make it easier for everybody to read. And then lastly, we're looking for the board's direction on the inclusion of a draft formalized process to address less than responsible conduct. And then lastly here, I've done up a little bit of a flow chart here, a little bit of a decision tree. Amanda, could you maybe drop that top piece to the bottom there? Okay. So up at the top there, you'll notice we start with complaint observed. So from there, first and foremost, direct resolution between the parties is encouraged. And if that resolves, well, then that resolves the complaint. If direct resolution between the parties isn't successful, that moves down. You'll notice there it's reported to the CAO and chair and referred to the informal resolution group. And that's made up of the chair, CAO, and chair of the HR committee, or Human Resources Committee, sorry. Firstly, would be looking at, is this applicable? Is this complaint applicable to this policy? If it's not applicable to the policy, it gets referred to there would be reviewed under that separate policy. If it is applicable, we're looking, is this a really serious, egregious complaint? If so, it gets referred to a formal resolution process right away. If not, the focus is always on that informal resolution piece. If that's not successful, you'll notice at the bottom here, kind of the last step is a formal resolution process where there would be a formal investigation, a report, and recommendations made to the board for their consideration. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. So I will entertain questions on the presentation, but then I want to recognize Director Horn before we look at to a motion. So some questions for the presentation that you've seen right now. And Director Mercer, go ahead.
Thank you. More of a comment, Mr. Chair. First, great big thank you to you, Ms. Van Ness, and staff, and to the HR committee who's here tonight. Everybody knows who we are. You know, we took on this role seriously. Obviously, we were asked to look at everything, but when we look at this decision tree, and it's unfortunate that it's formatted like that and we can't look at it in a bigger screen, because what we actually did was we recognized that, you know, we should have something. We should have something that if things went sideways. First of all, we all acknowledge that, you know, we all kind of get along. We're almost always respectful of each other. This is not something that's always required or has very often ever been required. And it's critical to point out that, you know, when we went through some of the things that have happened this year, pretty much none of them reached that was the complaint applicable to the code of conduct policy, where this would have kicked in. Most of the complaints weren't code of conduct, so they were dealt with in other ways instead of following this process through to the end. So this decision tree really just takes on the most egregious or serious of the issues that other communities are currently experiencing right now, and maybe wish they had this, because this lays it out as clear as day as to how it's to be followed. But we took it one step further, and we you know, as everybody here is aware, the HR committee is the rebranded internal affairs committee that I chaired for the last 4 years before this term. And we did have complaints. And when we walked through when we walked through how we handled those complaints, it actually follows exactly what this is, pretty much to the T. Like, it was brought in, is it serious? Could this be dealt with the harassment policy of the FVRD? No. Was it egregious? Absolutely was. And then how did we deal with it? We really did follow this tree. So all this does is formalize in front of the policy what actually has happened and does happen. And some of us are never aware of it. But this is actually the process that we followed, have followed for the last 5 years. We're in an open meeting. I won't get into any of the investigations, but I know most of you will know which ones I'm talking about. And it actually did follow this process. But again, thank you, Ms. Van Ness. It was a great job on your team and staff and Ms. Kinnaman in bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mercer. Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and thanks for the work of the committee. I tend to steer away from the enforcement aspect, I will admit it, but my question is are there examples where it's actually successful? I guess where I'm coming from, I think if certainly I'm a total fan of let's try to work this out, as the majority of that slide shows, and do understand perhaps sometimes more is needed, but generally if I guess if a person feels like it's being difficult, is the enforcement aspect, does it make a difference? Are there examples of that from the boards and municipalities that actually have the enforcement piece? I'd be curious about that.
Ms. Van Ness.
Through the chair to Director Dixon, I don't know that I can comment on that, because I would say that any time that a local government undergoes some type of formal investigation, that would be a confidential process. So I'm sorry, I don't think I can answer that.
Director McElhonick.
So I guess my question is, we have a community charter, and then we have laws. And if people get to the point where it's that egregious, there's legal implications and charges that happen. So I'm just wondering. And then there's the sanctions, so where, I guess there's that area in between. Like if, we had to have, what's the word I'm looking for? If we had to have something where we could have like, I've lost the word. And well, there's censure, there's all of those kinds of things, but enforcement, like if somebody did something egregious, wouldn't that kind of cross the line into lawful? And I mean, that was my question. I tend to, I mean, hopefully we would never get into some of these kinds of situations, but I mean, and then it gets really pricey. And then I guess, so if you're looking at that, and then also if it gets to that point and it becomes legal, there's also lawyer fees and all of that on top of the 20,000-30,000. So I guess I'm just finding it I'm not quite sure. It seems like do we really need that if there's laws and there's a community charter and we have that other piece? And I'm just not sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McAhonik. Not sure, Ms.
Would
Van
you
Ness,
like me to
you want
answer that?
comment,
No.
or Director Mercer, if you want to comment?
Yeah, I think I know where you're going. But I want to be clear, complaint applicable to the code of conduct, not the criminal code. If it's a criminal code investigation that's referred to the police, that's a whole different thing. This is our code of conduct. And it doesn't have to be expensive. We were very clear to put in here that this may not go to an outside agency. It's just that there is a more formal review done, and the chair may determine people within this room to do it. This is code of conduct. And if it crosses the line and it's criminal, we're no different than any organization in Canada. It would be referred to the police. This is simply the Fraser Valley Regional District's code of conduct.
And then it would be the enforcement piece would be.
Well, the enforcement is up to the board. That's why it's very clear. The investigator doesn't determine the enforcement or the sanction. It comes back to the board.
Thank you.
No, that's all right. Yeah, no, that's good.
Director Barkman.
You know, one thing I didn't notice here was there, unless I wasn't paying attention, is there a time limit when this happens? Instead of drawing things out, is that a viable question?
A very serious one that we had, if I may, we wrapped it up in 3 weeks and came back to the board.
So I think it's endeavoring to work as fast as practical. Ms. Van Ness, did you have any further?
Through the chair to Director Barkman, I was just curious if you meant, was there a time limit in which people had to bring forward these complaints? Was that your question?
Well, I guess that could be one, but once it's been identified, then is there a time limit? And if it's going to be resolved or should be resolved in 3 weeks, like we just heard here, is there any obligation? Like, can it be withdrawn or not withdrawn, withheld for a while, or what onus is the person on getting this forward?
Ms. Van Ness?
Through the chair to Director Barkman. So the policy as it's written, I believe it's the person is encouraged to bring forward a complaint within 90 days. I would think that any type of informal resolution or formal resolution would probably be wrapped up as quickly as possible. There's nothing identified in the policy as written, but there is a note in there about pausing during an election year.
Director Dickey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make the same comments that I made at the committee meeting. I worry that there are 24 very different personalities around this table, and if an issue develops, I would hope that the board would devote 95% of its energy to showing care and consideration and understanding for the individual involved, and perhaps 5% towards enforcement. I worry that some people might react to enforcement in a dangerous escalatory reaction, but I think it's a tough call on this. Thank you.
Director Facio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those who at UBC attended the small talk forum, one of our councillors did bring forward a very good suggestion, because small communities are very limited in resources and how they can manage this type of code of conduct, and that the provincial government should be looking at an ethics commissioner to take care of these sort of problems when it gets to depending on the seriousness, of course, of the issues. But that's something that came up to the small talk forum, and it was a good point brought up by one of the Harrison councillors. Thank you.
Director Shahal.
Thank you. I think there's something to be said for having a process in place when things are all good and fine. So when something does come up, there's a decision-making process already in place. So we're not running around trying to figure out how we're going to tackle an issue. So I think that this brings a little bit clarity in how the process will be once a complaint comes forward or an issue comes forward. So we can actually look at the informal process instead of trying to figure out what are the next steps.
Director Clute.
Thank you. That was kind of my train of thought as Director Dickey mentioned. So if the enforcement is utilized, if there's a sticky situation, I'll use myself as an example. Let's say I get a DUI, even though I don't drink, unless I can get a DUI for drinking eggnog. But in any event, if the board decides that I need to be removed off committees or some form of censor, would that not set us up for potentially legal implications of an individual who has gone through this process of enforcement, feeling that they have been unduly, as an elected official? I'm concerned about where this may bring us with respect to legal complications.
I know Director Mercer has his light on there, but go ahead, Director Mercer.
Yeah, I just have to stress again, this isn't enforcement. This is what happens to the complaint when it's received, right? And everybody, and how a board gets itself in trouble, or any organization gets itself in trouble, is when something progresses to the point of something needs to be done, and then you're challenged, well, how did you get here? How did you get to this point? This is just the process. It's the board decides what's going to happen. And the board may decide, no, we're not going to bear our legal butts and go down this road. This is just the process that's followed to get the information to the board. Nothing else. This has no decision making, none at all. It's not enforcement. This is fact finding. This just gets it to the board and lays out the process in which it gets to the board. That's all.
Director Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hearing questions of a legal nature. I myself have questions of a legal nature, and so I would move that we table the remainder of this matter until after closed and bring it to a resolution at that point.
Have a second, Renta? Seconded by Director Mercer. All in favor of tabling? Thank you. Motion carries. And we will return back to the item. Thank you, Ms. Van Ness, for your presentation. Ms. Kinnaman, next item.
8.1 is the financial plan 2023 to 2027 amendments for December.
Thank you. And Ms. Kinnaman, we do have one minor change to the motion resolution.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that in fact there were two amendments for the electoral area service areas, and in your package it reads that there was just one for electoral area service amendments.
Okay, so that's moved by Director Ross, seconded by Director McMahonic. Discussion, seeing none, all in favor, opposed if any. The item carries. Next item.
9.1 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Regional Growth Strategy Bylaw number 1706.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Horton, seconded by Director Lowen. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, item carries. Next item.
9.2 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Security Issuing Bylaw number 1722.
Okay, first reading. Moved by Director Clute, seconded by Director Adamo. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, item carries. Second and third, moved by Director Facio, seconded by Director Pranger. All in favor, opposed, if any, item carries. Adoption is moved.
Can I jump in with a question here before we
Yeah,
adopt?
you bet.
Thank
Do you want to move?
I'll
the
move,
motion? Thank you. It's moved by Director Dixon and seconded by Director Dickey and Director Dixon.
Just because I'm pretty sure I'll get this question. I believe somewhere in here, this is a 20-year loan. Will it be at one rate or is there an option for renewal at some point along the way?
Swansboro.
Okay, thank you through the chair to Director Dixon. Yes, the rates are only guaranteed for 10 years, so there are rate renewals through MFA. Thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, the item carries. Next item.
Moving down to section 10, I believe you have a script in front of you,
Thank
Chair
you.
Lum.
So pursuant to Part 14, Division 9 of the Local Government Act, this is the opportunity for the FERD Board to hear from the public regarding the one development variance permit listed on the agenda for the meeting. Anyone who believes that their interests are affected by the proposed application will be given an opportunity to speak. If you have any verbal comments with respect to these permits and you're joining us on Zoom or on a computer or smart device, please press the raise hand function. When it's your turn to speak, you'll be asked to unmute yourself. If you're joining us on Zoom by phone, please press *9. This will notify staff you wish to speak. When you're prompted to unmute yourself, please press *6. Those of you wishing to speak are asked to begin your presentation by providing your name and address, which will be recorded and form part of our official record. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes and find your remarks to the application at hand. Ms. Kinnaman, item.
10.1 is Development Variance Permit 2022-05 to permit an oversized storage shed at Lot 203, 1436 Frost Road in Electoral Area H.
Thank you. And are there any comments from the public regarding this development variance permit? And just note that there was some public feedback that was circulated. It's on table, so you all have printed copies that were provided of some letters. But Ms. Van Ness, anyone online?
We have nobody joining us online or in person.
Thank you. Nobody in person, going once, going twice. And what's the board's wishes? Director Dixon.
Move the staff recommendation to refuse.
Okay, the motion is to deny. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Dickey. Discussion? Hearing none. You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Next item.
11.1 is Air Park Hangar leases. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Popo, seconded by Director Adamo. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, item carries. Next item.
12.1 is public hearings in the electoral areas policy.
Thank you. That's moved
So
by
moved.
Director Castle, seconded by Director Johnson. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, the item carries. Next item.
12.2 is parcel frontage waiver for a 3-lot subdivision at 41523 Nacomin Island Trunk Road in electoral area G.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Castle, seconded by Director Johnson. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, item carries. Next item.
12.3 is Emergency and Disaster Management Act and regulatory consultation. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Ross, seconded by Director Clute. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, the item carries. Next item.
12.4 is update to combined E911 budgetary risks and next gen 911 transition.
Move recommendation.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Facio, seconded by Director Mercer. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, item carries. Next item.
12.5 is the regulation of the sale and or discharge of fireworks.
Thank you. Director Castle, your light is on.
Thank you, Chair Lum. I'll be moving the motion in the agenda with an addition, but I'd like to provide some context about this to the board before I make the motion. I'm very pleased to have received the staff report as we work to address concerns of public safety with regards to fireworks in Area G. During the election campaign and after, I was contacted by a number of Area G and Area C residents who expressed concern around the sale and discharge of fireworks and how that impacts livestock, specifically horses, and brings anxiety to residents whose properties interface with the forested areas, especially with the risk of wildfires in the area. Around Halloween last year, I also received a number of calls and emails from residents in the city of Mission concerned with the sale of fireworks being allowed in electoral areas. And recently, we saw comments from the mayor of Mission in the media expressing concern and frustration with the sale of fireworks in neighboring jurisdictions and how that impacts the city's ability to enforce its own bylaws prohibiting the sale and discharge of fireworks within the municipality. And finally, Lacamo First Nation has requested that the FVRD prohibit fireworks in the electoral areas to support their own law that makes fireworks illegal on all LFN territories. Our discussion at East last week saw some directors concerned about the costs associated with the introduction of a proposed ban on the sale of fireworks in Area G, as described in option 2 of the report. After discussions with staff, it has become evident to me that we can proceed with the bylaw to ban the sale of fireworks in Area G without the added communication expense, and that we can effectively communicate the ban in Area G through regular FVRD channels, namely the FVRD's digital sign in DeRoche and social media. So with that in mind, and after discussions with directors on the north side of the river, I would like to move that motion on the screen. The first part of the motion is the motion that is recommended in the agenda. The second part of the motion is that the Regional District Board direct staff to develop a new bylaw to prohibit the sale of fireworks in FVRD electoral areas F and G, and prepare a corresponding amendment to FVRD bylaw offense notice enforcement bylaw number 1415 to enable ticketing for bylaw offense related to the sale of fireworks in electoral areas F and G.
Thank you. We have a seconder to the motion.
Davidson.
Seconded by Director Davidson. Further discussion? Any further discussion to you, Director Castle? I see Director Dixon. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess what I'm not understanding is how adding in, and I was one of the people concerned about costs, how adding in this as a new bylaw and with the ability to ticket and with our bylaw offense and all the rest of that wouldn't actually be a cost item.
Ms. Kinnaman?
Sure, I think I'll just pass this over to our Director of Planning and Development, Graham Danilus.
Mr. Danilus?
Thank you, Chair. We outlined in the staff report that staff consider that a bylaw that would ban the sale of fireworks and F&G could be administered with our existing staff contingent. And so certainly there would be resources that we would need to allocate to it through the year, but we could do so with our existing contingent of staff. We had proposed $3,500 to be added to our budget for supplementary communications, and that might take the form, for example, of a mobile roadside stand at the entry point to the community during the fireworks season, or targeted ad buys on social media. We think those are nice to have and not necessary to have, and that our normal corporate communications platforms can spread the word effectively as well.
Thank you, Mr. Danilus. Director Gibson?
Thank you. My understanding is that I've traveled that route, the north of the river, and I'm still seeing fireworks for sale signs. I presume there must be on First Nations lands or not. That's my assumption. The second thing is, aren't there people who are qualified, who are people that have some kind of competence with firearms, not firearms, fireworks, who can actually take responsibility and do it safely, notwithstanding the bylaw that you're suggesting?
Yeah, Ms. Kinnaman?
Through the chair to Director Gibson, just for clarification, are you asking about the discharge of fireworks? Because what's being proposed here is about the sale of fireworks. So there's no question about whether there are individuals who could discharge fireworks in a safe and responsible manner, but more so this is about the sale of fireworks.
Well, I guess they're not mutually exclusive, to be honest. But the other concern I have is there is some legitimate use for fireworks. It's not totally obnoxious. We heard the point about them scaring animals. That's troubling. But in our own community, we have people who are qualified to use fireworks. I just wonder how they fit into the paradigm.
My understanding, Director Gibson and I offered some of this advice to Director Castle when we spoke, was that he get in touch with our fire chief in Chilliwack, who's involved right now in drafting a bylaw that would differentiate what purchasing retail fireworks versus professional fireworks and the qualifications you have to have put on a professional fireworks show, which then you apply for a permit, you go through the city, special event licensing, that kind of thing. So I think what you're identifying is when staff are looking at perhaps this bylaw differentiating what retail fireworks and the sale of retail fireworks stand at a roadside stand or something like that versus a professional fireworks show put on by qualified professionals with a permit and application through a local government is. And so I think that's probably considerations for staff to look into when they're drafting the bylaw. Director Horn.
Thank you. Speaking in support of the motion, I want to add 3 reasons why I think it's very timely. The first is that we have come to understand in our city that enforcement has to happen at the sale portion of things. It's just impossible to deploy people around the city and be there in a timely way to deal with all the incidences of fireworks use. The second is I would remind or inform folks here that the Mission RCMP serves these 2 electoral areas, and yet as soon as they cross Shook Road, they don't have the same powers to deal with this issue. And so this gives them a tool that they would be able to bring to bear. And thirdly, I would point out that fireworks are sold for a longer time throughout the year now for other festivals and are now overlapping, as we saw last October, with an extended drought season. And therefore, there is a very high fire risk in some of the areas in F&G that we would need to be concerned about. And we share the forest with those electoral areas. So I'll be voting strongly in favor of this because it truly represents why I think we take regional approaches.
Thank you, Director Horn. I guess I have a question, and I really I don't want to muddy the water. I know this was discussed at East, but if it's not an additional cost, this looks like this appears to be just up to the discretion of the individual area director. And I'm just wondering why it wouldn't be across all of the areas. In Chilliwack, we've banned the sale of fireworks, and this year, driving through on my way to work through Yarrow, all of the fireworks signs that were put up were pointing up the hill towards Cultus Lake. So I'm just wondering why this wouldn't just be banned across the whole region, or if it's just a little bit of apprehension on individual area directors' parts. Ms. Kinnaman.
Well, Chair Lum, it's difficult for me to speak on behalf of the individual electoral areas that chose not to participate in this. However, there are certainly a number of examples in our bylaws where they apply for one electoral area and not another. So it wouldn't be unusual for our bylaw officers to have to do this. From a staff perspective, we would always encourage EA-wide bylaws. It certainly makes communicating those bylaws simpler. And also it makes the job of the bylaw enforcement officer simpler, particularly when the boundaries of some of these electoral areas, are not always clear. So when you have electoral areas abutting up against each other, it's nice when they have the same bylaws, but certainly there are examples of others. And at the East discussion, there was some concern raised by several that they did not wish to participate in this.
Yeah, and I guess what I was just trying to tease out was if it was a money thing, you know, maybe there's a broader discussion where there's significant regional benefit if you've got a whole bunch of municipalities. And again, I'm not trying to speak on behalf of municipalities, but maybe this opens the door to further discussion. But I see Director Dickey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly not speaking for the other electoral area directors, but for myself, in 20 years, I've not ever had a complaint about fireworks sale or use in my electoral area. And it's more rural area than the urban communities in the regional district. And until people tell me otherwise, I'm not going to be passing new regulations.
Okay. Director Wardenberg, go ahead.
Yeah, just a little bit of an explanation as far as Area C position. Well, first of all, I think the $3,500 is not very much money for an issue that could help with just the whole area in general. I think I don't think it's a real money issue for Area C. It's more of if I could divide this into a Lacamo First Nations and Area G, I would, but we have competing interests in Area C as well as a First Nation that also sells it. So between the three First Nations in Area C, there's a difference of opinions as far as the sale goes and the discharge, as well as we have Harrison Mills, Hemlock Valley, which promote the fireworks or the discharge of fireworks, you know, under the right conditions in a safe manner, mind you. So if I could separate Area C into three areas, I would definitely support this in the western edge. But I can't, so I won't. But that's what I say.
Director Dixon.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel I need to clarify that those signs that are pointing, you know, around the arrow turn up the hill are not pointing to areas. And I've never had complaints either. The fireworks are being sold in my area. First Nations are selling them. It's one of the things they felt they wanted to do. And as you know, this bylaw will have zero impact on that. So, you know, while I was supportive of when it was just the first part, I'm not of the additional bylaw addition.
Thank you. And again, not meaning to open up a can of worms, but likely residents of Chilliwack at least will continue to buy their illegal fireworks in our adjacent areas and then come into our city and light them off and cause complaints. So that's a bit frustrating. But Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Just obviously in support of this, both parts of this, just to reiterate that areas F and G are perhaps not all electoral areas are the same. Areas F and G are distinct from the remainder in that we're heavy on the livestock side, and fireworks and livestock do not go well together. So this is our process for getting some controls around it. And if there's an alternative way, great. But this is only about restricting sales, and there's really only one place right now, I think, in Area G that sales. So this is off some more preventative than anything else. So costs should be minor, and our bylaws are not universal across all electoral areas, and this is going to be a minor exception, I think, to the whole. Thank you.
Director Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So in Area A, it's really a non-issue. There is Boothroyd Band puts on fireworks displays. So I'm not in a position to ban the sale of fireworks for our area. Like I say, I don't receive any complaints. Livestock certainly don't like fireworks. Dogs don't either, but those animals don't like thunder and lightning either.
Director McConick.
So my area, Area E, the only time I would be super concerned is, when we have like drought conditions and then we have a campfire ban and that is included, the ban of fireworks and anything like that. So I think we're kind of covered, and I think the residents in Area E, we, you know, the fire department, there's different things that happen there. They have fireworks, and I think they would be feeling that, we would be interfering in their autonomy if we start bylawing them to death. So I think we're covered with the, campfire bans and stuff when that happens. Thanks.
I apologize if I sound a little sour on this. The front of my car was burned off by illegally set off fireworks. It lit a hedgerow on fire, and that was in July. So I burned the front of my vehicle down. It was parked in front of some cedar hedging. So a little sensitive to this maybe, but I'm ready for the question. Oh, sorry, Director Adamo, go ahead.
Thanks very much through the chair to everyone here, really. I've gone through Area B quite extensively over this matter for the last few months, and while I've received numerous complaints in many areas, many people are still in favor of having access to fireworks. There's a bigger picture here that people seem to be really forgetting. There's so many illegal fireworks going out there that the youth are using that lit off the front of your car and that have scared numerous dogs to the point of escape and death, which is really quite bizarre and still seems to be okay to people to just go ahead and do that and have a bunch of kids show up in a resort community where God knows where they picked up their fireworks. They picked them up anywhere. And there are so many people selling them now on the sides of the road that we just have no control over anything. If this is a place to start that we can help enforce something like that, then I would support both parts of this segment, and then we'll deal with it as we move forward. But I think this is a really good start, and there's been a lot of good discussion about it, but we're still missing some points and still need some work. And I'd like to start with this.
Yeah, thank you, Director Damo. And that's a good reminder too, that this is restricted to F and G. I of course muddied the water a little bit with my comments, but I was just curious. I wasn't there for the discussion IDs, but certainly for F and G. So I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Next item is 13.1, which is our consent agenda, running from 13.1.1 through 13.1.6. Happy to separate any items.
Thank you. We're in a second on this. Moved by Director McMahonic, second by Director Shahal. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Next item.
Item 14 is motions brought forward from the December 12th, 2023 Electoral Area Services Committee of the Whole meeting. Staff are going to put that motion on screen, and just for the full board's benefit, this was the budget meeting for the electoral area wide services, which would include things like emergency management, bylaw enforcement, electoral area planning. So those EA-wide, all 8 electoral area budgets is one of the stages of our budget process.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder. It's moved by Director Castle, second by Director Dreesen. Discussion. Being none, all in favor. Opposed, if any, the item carries. Next item.
Moving down to item 16. We have 16.1, which is the Human Resources Update Year-End Statistics. It's an information item. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Don't see any. Next item.
16.2 was erroneously put under as an item for information and correspondence, but there actually was a motion for the board's consideration, which can be found on page 360 or on your screen, which is that the board supports staff in developing a policy related to the use of dedicated EA director project pages on the FVRD's public engagement website. Have your say.
Thank you. We have a mover and a seconder on this. It's moved by Director Adamo, second by Director Johnson. For the discussion. Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed, if any, item carries. Next item.
Next item is item 17, which is reports by staff. And I just wanted to take a moment to recognize our staffer, Lauren Olenek. She had some really good news today from the International Institute of Municipal Clerks that she is now a certified municipal clerk. So congratulations, Lauren.
And as such, will you be teaching us the certified clerk secret handshake is the question.
Well, I believe you could maybe inquire with her about the reasons that the gavel was removed from your possession.
Yeah, I was about to make a code of conduct complaint, but against Director Prager, do that, I guess.
So next item is item 18, which is reports by board directors.
Directors, now would be your opportunity. Director Facio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is very brief. The lights are still glowing in Harrison Hot Springs, and they're going to be there till I think the middle of January. So come down, enjoy. It's a beautiful sight to see, and we'll make you very welcome. And if you find me, I'll treat you to something. But on another note, I would like to wish all my fellow directors and our fabulous staff. We're so fortunate in this in our group to have such a dedicated staff that I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a healthy and happy New Year. And God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Facio. Director Dixon.
Thank you for that, Director Facio. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly just congratulations to the Columbia Valley and the Cultus Lake Fire Department because they just had hugely successful canned food drives in December, and it was just awesome to see for our area. I also want to take this chance to thank the city of Chilliwack. Congratulations, because I've recently been downtown a few times. Maybe we all have, and maybe all the areas have these things, but well done. It's just fabulous down there. I had my mom with me and she loved the tree and everything else that was there. So it's a great place to hang out for a little while. So thank you for that. Thank you for this fabulous picture. It's a nice memory there. Yeah, great looking bunch, aren't we? And finally, I have a request too. I think this is the time I can do it. Just in my area, actually it's on the American side of my area. There's a lot of clear-cut logging going on in the Frost Creek watershed and the Blue Creek watershed. Both of those are prone to flooding, and there has been several cases over the years where they log and it pours rain and it all comes down in the creeks and does cause an incredible amount of damage. Right now, the province is spending $7 million on phase 1 to clean up the Blue Creek damage from the last atmospheric river, and the logging has actually just started. If you've been to Cultus Lake at all recently, you will see it. Today I met with MLA Patton, just asking for some support. She has been bringing this forward to her counterparts in the provincial level, but what we need is something that some kind of tools to go across the border to say we exist in Columbia Valley and the potential for damage from your operation is a serious consideration for us. So I do plan to write a letter to all the relevant parties, the private landowner, as well as the some of the ministers, and I'm just asking for board support just to write in that letter. I'll do the work. It's just that I may mention that, the FVRD board in it.
Yep. Thank you, Director Dixon. So if I understand correctly, you're just looking for a motion or a support in a letter you're going to write, or would you like it to come from the
I will work with the CAO on the letter, as well as making sure, that you're aware of it.
Through the chair to Director Dixon, was it your hope to have the letter signed by the chair of the board, or was it from the chair of the board? So
it would be
perhaps a motion would be ideal if you wanted to seek a seconder.
Okay, and seconded by Director Horn, and we'll identify where it's going to be sent off to. Okay, with Director Dixon's help, assistance. Thank you. Don't see any other questions on the motion here. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that item carries. And any more, Director Dixon? Nope. Good. Thank you. Director Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things quickly. In response to my correspondence with the MLA's office and the MPs, the MLA's office shared the letters that MLA Taggart has written to Ministers Ma and Heeman, asking them for immediate support for the families affected by the Kukupee fire out of Kiefers. And along with that, she wrote a letter also requesting assistance in securing resources and aid for the swift rebuilding, as she worded it, of Rio Rafting Resort. So I'm really hoping that her letters will see some help for those people that have suffered so much loss. And we had a successful stuff the cruiser for the food bank. And I'm also happy to report I found 3 companies that are willing to provide septic tank service in Area A, one company out of Merritt, one out of Lillooet, and the other out of Clinton. So that takes care of Area A for now. And apparently the new bridge is supposed to be opening, I believe, tomorrow at the summit of Jackass Mountain. And they are currently working on a new overpass for the railway, but I heard that will take 5 years. So in the meantime, we still have the railway tracks running across Trans-Canada with traffic light control. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Director Adamo.
Thanks very much to the chair. This is more of my Area B PSA. This time of year, it seems necessary to mention it. Once again, if you're traveling the Hope Princeton through the Christmas holidays or the canyon and you don't have snow tires, don't leave your house. We had 5 inches today alone just in our area, and all of the resources of our volunteer fire departments are called out on a regular basis and the first on scene to help anyone in that corridor. With our RCMP shortage and our highway patrol shortage right now, we're at a really serious position or in a serious state in that area. So please slow down, travel safe, enjoy the holiday, and allow our firefighters, our volunteers that are out there every day to do the same throughout this period as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Director Adamo. And I had the opportunity to see those fine folks in action. I was up in the number 3 and on my way home from our family vacation at Manning Park, and we stopped to buy some Smarties at the RV park there. And I didn't know that that's where the informal meeting of the coffee of your volunteer fire department meets. But they were just having a brief interlude between responding to a number of accidents and challenges, people who've drove off the road because they didn't have appropriate tires on their vehicle. So I certainly pass along my thanks to them. They're a hard working bunch for sure. Director McElhattock.
So not such good news for my residents in Area E that were impacted by the atmospheric river. They keep getting stonewalled. So we just heard again. First, they've been told numerous times it'll be March and then it'll be early fall. And we've just heard again, reached out again. They finally responded, and they're just not giving them a timeline at all. And Christmas is coming, and it's been over 2 years. So I keep pushing with the different ministers in our MLA, but I'm really not getting any traction. So it's very disappointing, and so I got that. I do have some good news. We have our second Fire Smart neighborhood in the Chilliwack River Valley, Slessie, and we're going to start on Baker Trails next year. And I want to wish all the staff and my fellow board members Merry Christmas and health and happiness for the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McElhattock. Director Horn.
Very quickly, Mr. Chair, just an acknowledgement that in the last few days, the city of Mission lost its oldest and one of its longest serving volunteers, Freedom of the City recipient, 103 years old, Rona Jacobson. If you've been to Heritage Park, you know that her and her husband's name is on the famous rose garden there. So flags will fly at half mast, and we send our condolences to her family and to everybody with whom she was connected.
Thank you, Director Horn, and please pass along our condolences as well. I don't see any other reports from board directors. Ms. Kinnaman, next item.
Moving to public question period for items relevant to the agenda. We do not have any members of the public in our boardroom, but we will just check in with our corporate officer, Jamie Van Ness.
Ms. Van Ness, or
We have-
home audience?
We have nobody joining us this evening and no questions have been received.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman.
Looking for a resolution to close the meeting.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
By Director Facio, second by Director Lowen. All in favor, opposed if any, item carries.
And just take a quick recess, about 4 minutes,
We will take a just
which
by
is
going home.
so. Chair, the next item on the open agenda is item 7.1, which is the FVRD Code of Conduct.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Horn, seconded by Director Mercer. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, opposed if any, the item carries. Thank you. Next item.
Looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. Merry Christmas.
That's moved by Director Facio, seconded by Director Mercer. All in favor, opposed if any. The item carries. Merry Christmas, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.